Have you ever looked at the person you love and quietly wondered, why do we feel so far apart, even when we live under the same roof? If you're exhausted in your marriage, tired of talking without being understood, or tempted to give up because tiny cracks keep widening, this video is my real story in the United States. A journey showing that sometimes slowing down, how we love, speak, and listen, can gently heal a breaking heart. When love met a new country, imagine stepping off a plane and feeling like the entire world is watching you breathe wrong. That was me. Arriving in the United States for love, clutching my suitcase like it was the last piece of my old life that still made sense. People think moving for love sounds romantic, like a movie where the airport lights magically fix your future. But the truth is quieter, heavier. It feels like standing at the edge of a swimming pool, knowing you can't swim and someone whispers, "Jump! Love will hold you up." And you want to believe them so badly. My husband was waiting at the arrival's gate, smiling the way Americans smile, wide, confident, almost too bright. Meanwhile, my heart was doing the emotional equivalent of buffering. I loved him, but love doesn't instantly translate into feeling at home. Even the air smelled different. The silence felt different. The way people said, "How are you?" without waiting for an answer. That confused me for weeks. First, everything was adorable in that new life glow. Our tiny apartment felt like a shared secret. We cooked together. We laughed at my mistakes with English. I would mispronounce sheet, and he'd choke on his coffee trying not to laugh. It was messy and sweet and warm in all the right places. But the brain is a strange creature. When you uproot your entire world, it doesn't applaud you for bravery. Instead, it panics. It whispers, "You've made a terrible mistake." At 2 a.m. for no reason. Living in a new country felt like my senses were always on high alert. Every sound, every face, every small decision, my brain micromanaged all of it. And marriage, ironically, made it harder. You'd think love softens the landing, but no. When you're overwhelmed, every tiny misunderstanding with your partner feels like a personal earthquake. One wrong tone, one confused expression, and suddenly your nervous system thinks your entire relationship is collapsing. That's what stress does. It turns your emotions into terrible narrators. The strangest part? My English was fine, but my emotions didn't care. When your heart feels lost, language feels like running through water. Words come out slower. You second-guess every sentence. You hear yourself speaking and think, "God, do I sound stupid?" Even at home, the safest place, my voice would shrink without permission. But here's the thing people forget. Love is not a country. Love is a practice. And back then, without realizing it, we were just two people learning how to speak the same emotional language while standing in a place where neither of us fully understood the rules yet. And honestly, that's the moment everything truly began. Lost in our own home. Here's a funny thing about marriage. You can share a bed, a bank account, and a grocery list, yet somehow feel like you're living on two different planets. Our home in the US was small. Just one bedroom, thin walls, and a kitchen that echoed when you closed the fridge too hard. But somehow, the silence between us felt bigger than the apartment itself. And the worst part? Most of our conflicts didn't come from big problems. They came from tiny misunderstandings that grew claws. It's strange how cultural habits sneak into your marriage like uninvited guests. Back home, when someone loves you, they show it through actions, cutting fruit, checking on you, staying close. But in my new life, my husband showed love through words. And guess what? Words were the exact thing I was struggling with. So there we were. Him talking to express love, me acting to express love, both of us missing each other by emotional miles. One evening he asked, "Are you okay?" A simple question, normal for him. But the tone was quick, casual, the American kind of casual that sounds like a drive-through order. My brain, already tired from trying to perform English all day, heard it as annoyance. I responded with silence. Not because I was upset, because I was translating in my head, checking my answer, checking my tone, trying not to start a fight. He saw the silence and assumed I didn't want to talk to him. You see the problem? Two people trying to love, but their methods crashing like software updates that don't match. The psychology behind it is stupidly simple. When your brain is overwhelmed, it stops processing nuance. It hears shadows instead of words. A loving question sounds like criticism. A normal conversation feels like a test. And in a multicultural marriage, your nervous system is basically running a marathon with no training. I didn't know this back then. I just knew that every misunderstanding left a tiny bruise on my heart. Sometimes we'd sit at dinner and talk about our day. Or rather, he talked. I nodded, searching for the right phrases like I was digging through a messy drawer. By the time I found the right words, the moment had already passed. That's the thing about slow communication. It's honest, but it's late. And he mistook my slowness for disinterest. I mistook his fast speech for impatience. The universe really has a sense of humor. We weren't fighting. We weren't angry. We were just missing each other in the house we tried so hard to build together. And that's how you can get lost in your own home. Not because you don't love each other, but because you don't know how to translate your heart fast enough. The night everything broke. There's a moment in every marriage where the room feels too quiet, the air feels too sharp, and your heart beats like it's trying to warn you. If you say one more wrong sentence, everything might fall apart. For us, that moment happened on a cold Friday night when nothing dramatic actually happened. No betrayal, no big lie, no Hollywood explosion. Just two tired people speaking two emotional languages, running out of energy to translate. It started with something ridiculously small. He asked why I hadn't replied to his text earlier. Just a simple question. But my day had been heavy. I'd spent hours trying to sound normal at work, pushing my brain to keep up with fast English, fast jokes, fast everything. By the time I got home, I had no fast left in me. I answered too softly. He heard distance. And his voice tightened in that American way. Controlled, polite, but sharp enough to cut your confidence. My nervous system went straight into panic mode. Scientists call it amygdala hijack. But honestly, it felt more like my emotions slammed the emergency button and yelled, "Retreat!" My throat tightened, my thoughts blurred, and suddenly I wasn't standing in our kitchen anymore. I was back in all the places where I had felt misunderstood, unseen, too slow, too foreign, too much work to love. He kept talking. I kept shrinking. That's the dangerous part of marriage. Silence becomes an answer, even when you don't mean it to. And then it happened, one sentence that cracked everything open. He said, "I feel like I'm losing you." Not angry, not loud, just heartbreakingly honest. And it shattered me in a way I didn't expect, because the truth was, I felt lost too. Not because of him, but because I'd been carrying the weight of learning a new country, a new life, a new version of myself all at once. And when you're exhausted, love feels like another thing you might fail at. That night, for the first time, I wondered whether crossing an ocean for love had been naive. Whether the version of me he fell in love with was slowly disappearing under the pressure of being good enough. In a place where I was always a few seconds behind, we didn't yell. We didn't threaten. We just stood on opposite sides of the kitchen island, breathing unevenly, both terrified of the same thing but unable to say it clearly. I want to understand you, but I don't know how anymore. Marriage experts say couples don't fall apart from lack of love. They fall apart from lack of communication during stress. And that night, stress was running the show. Everything felt like it was breaking. But in a strange way, that was the first night we finally touched the real problem. A quiet apology that softened us. Here's the thing no one tells you about marriage. The real turning points don't arrive with dramatic speeches or music swelling in the background. They show up quietly, like a soft knock on the door of your ego, asking politely if it can come in. The morning after that painful night, our home felt like a museum of unspoken words. Even the coffee machine sounded guilty. We moved slowly, carefully, like two people trying not to break what already felt cracked. Around noon, he placed a cup of tea next to me. Not coffee tea, the one I always drank when my chest felt heavy. He didn't say a word. Just set it down gently, the way you'd place a fragile object on a shaky shelf. And somehow that small gesture knocked the air out of my lungs more than any apology could. It was love translated into action, simple and clear. I see you. I'm trying. I whispered, thank you. But the words felt too small for what the moment held. When you grow up in a culture where emotions are often expressed through care rather than talk, tiny gestures can feel like entire paragraphs. He didn't know that, of course. But maybe love doesn't always need to know. Sometimes it just needs to stay. We finally sat down on the couch, the silence stretching between us like a long bridge neither of us knew how to cross. And then in the quietest voice he said, "I'm sorry if I made you feel pressured. I didn't mean to." No perfect script. No clever phrasing. Just sincerity, slow, hesitant, human. The kind of apology that lands softly but stays. And something strange happened in my brain. When someone speaks gently, your nervous system stops bracing for impact. It begins to listen. Neuroscientists call it co-regulation. Two bodies calming each other down just by existing in the same softer space. That day, for the first time in a long time, I felt my breath ease without permission. I admitted something I'd been too scared to say. I feel slow here, slow in English, slow in understanding, slow in everything. And when I feel slow, I feel small. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss it. He just nodded, as if my feelings were suddenly pieces of a puzzle he could finally see. And then so gently it almost didn't feel real, he said, "Then let's go slower. Together." It sounds simple, right? But in marriage, simple is rare. Simple is brave. That we spent the rest of that afternoon talking. Not fast, not polished. Just two people using short sentences, long pauses, and imperfect English to rebuild something that had been quietly drowning under expectations neither of us meant to create. A quiet apology didn't fix our marriage, but it softened us. And soft is where healing begins. Building us one gentle word. If you've ever tried to fix a marriage, you know it never happens with one big conversation. Healing is not a grand event. It's a bunch of tiny, awkward moments stitched together with effort. After that quiet apology, we didn't magically become the perfect couple. We just decided to do one thing differently. Slow down our words. It sounds embarrassingly simple, but when your heart has been running on fear and assumptions, slowing down feels like learning how to breathe again. Picture this: two adults sitting at a kitchen table in the US practicing how to talk to each other as if we were both learning English for the first time. And in a way we were. Not English the language, English the emotion. We practiced speaking like people who actually wanted to understand, not win. And that's much harder than it sounds. The first thing we changed was the speed. Americans talk fast, with their thoughts leaping ahead like caffeinated squirrels. My brain, already juggling culture shock and self-doubt, couldn't keep up. But when he slowed down, really slowed down, something shifted. My brain stopped panicking long enough to hear him. This is an actual psychological truth. The nervous system can only process emotional nuance when it's not overwhelmed. Translation: slow talking equals fewer emotional earthquakes. We also began using simpler sentences. No assumptions. No guessing games. No, you should know how I feel. Just short, honest phrases that sounded almost childish but worked like magic. I feel tired. I need a break. I don't understand. Can you say it again slowly? This makes me anxious. I'm not upset, just overwhelmed. Therapists call this low-stakes language. I call it relationship CPR. And then there was the listening part. Oh God, the listening. Most people think they're good listeners until they actually try to listen with their full body. Eyes soft, shoulders relaxed, mouth closed. When he listened that way, I felt safe speaking even when my English was clumsy or my emotions messy. Safety creates courage. And courage creates connection. It's the simplest science in the world but the hardest to practice. Point one night, while we washed dishes, we made a tiny rule. No correcting each other's grammar when we're talking about feelings. If you want to ruin intimacy, correct someone mid-sentence. Nothing kills vulnerability faster than, actually, it's pronounced. So he stopped, and suddenly I spoke more. My English wasn't perfect, but my heart finally had room. We also practiced a strange but powerful habit, repeating what the other person said to confirm meaning. You feel lonely even when I'm here? Yes, exactly. That exactly became our favorite victory. Little by little, gentle words softened sharp edges. Little by little, understanding replaced guessing. Little by little, you and me started becoming us. And sometimes that's all marriage really is, building a life together one gentle sentence at a time. The day we started understanding. Some days arrive quietly but end up changing everything. For us, that day started with something painfully ordinary. A misunderstanding about grocery shopping. Yes, grocery shopping. Marriage is hilarious like that. You can survive immigration paperwork, cultural gaps, and emotional meltdowns, But one wrong carton of milk will send both of you into an existential crisis. He had asked for whole milk, but I heard oat milk. When I came home with the wrong one, he sighed, not angrily, just tiredly. But my brain, always ready to catastrophize, translated that sigh into "you're failing. You don't belong. You'll never get this right." That's what stress does. It adds subtitles to your partner's voice that they never wrote. I snapped back with something defensive. He responded with confusion. And for a moment we stood there frozen, me clutching the grocery bag like a shield, him staring like he was trying to read a map in a language he didn't speak. But then something strange happened. He paused. Not the impatient kind of pause, this one was soft, intentional, the kind that invites safety. He walked over slowly and said, "Can we try again? I think we're misunderstanding each other." No big speech. No "you always." No "you never." Just an invitation. That invitation changed everything. That we sat at the small dining table. The same table that had heard too many tense conversations. And we tried something new, calm curiosity. Instead of assuming, we asked simple questions. What did you hear me say? What did you think I meant? How did that make you feel? Simple questions, but they sliced through layers of confusion like light slipping under a door. For the first time in months, I didn't feel judged for being slow. He didn't feel shut out by my silence. Our nervous systems weren't fighting each other. They were finally syncing. Scientists call this empathic attunement. When two people emotionally tune into the same frequency. It's the moment your body whispers, "You're safe. You can soften." And I softened. I told him I often felt stupid when I misunderstood small things. That English sometimes felt like a slippery rope I couldn't hold on to. That every mistake made me worry I was becoming a burden. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix it. He just held my hand, his thumb tracing slow circles like he was quietly telling me, "I'm here. Stay with me." Then he admitted something too. He often felt helpless. Like he was trying to love me the right way but didn't know the right language, emotionally or culturally. And that sigh, it wasn't disappointment. It was fear. Fear of failing me. In that moment we weren't two people fighting. We were two humans trying to understand the same pain from different angles. And that's the day everything shifted, not because we solved anything big, but because for the first time we listened to understand, not to defend. The milk was wrong, but the moment was right. And sometimes that's enough to start healing. Love is a daily practice. People think a healed marriage looks like a movie ending, sunset kisses, perfect timing, two people suddenly understanding each other for the rest of eternity. But real love, real marriage, looks more like a daily workout for your emotional muscles. And trust me, some days you feel like skipping leg day. After that small breakthrough over the milk misunderstanding, something softened between us. Not magically, not instantly, more like the way ice melts, slow, reluctant, but inevitable once warmth finally reaches it. We made a quiet decision that we never said out loud. Love would be practiced, not assumed. And that changed everything. Every morning before the chaos of work and culture and English and stress invaded our brains, we created a tiny ritual. We called it our soft start. 5 minutes. Just 5. Sitting on the couch with warm coffee, speaking slowly, asking one honest question. How's your heart today? Not how are you? Because that question is a linguistic scam. It demands a quick answer, not a true one. But how's your heart? Invites the truth, and the truth is the only thing that can glue two people back together. Some mornings my answer was messy. I feel heavy. I feel slow today. I feel scared you'll get tired of me not fitting in. And instead of rushing to reassure me, he'd just nod. Sometimes he'd squeeze my hand. Sometimes that was all I needed. Validation is strange like that. Small gestures feel like giant lifeboats when you're drowning quietly inside yourself. We also practice microcommunication throughout the day. Not long conversations, just tiny check-ins like emotional breadcrumbs so neither of us would get lost. Heading home. Need anything? Just thinking of you. I'm overwhelmed but not upset. I need 5 minutes to reset. Do these sound simple? Because they are. But simple is sustainable. And sustainable is what saves marriages. And then there was the hardest habit of all, slowing down arguments before they started. Whenever tension crept in through a sigh, a tone, a misunderstanding, we used a question that became our secret weapon. Is this about us or about today? 90% of the time it was about today. Stress, exhaustion, cultural overwhelm, language fatigue. Not us. Not love. Just life. We learned to hug before we argued. Sounds ridiculous, right? Two adults hugging like overgrown toddlers before discussing anything serious. But it works. Hugging activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Translation. It tells your brain you're not in danger, so you can stop preparing for emotional war. Once calm, we could actually hear each other. And slowly, brick by brick, we built something sturdier than romance. A partnership that breathes. Not perfect. Not poetic. Just steady. Safe. Warm. Love stopped being something we fell into. It became something we practiced daily, gently, intentionally. And the funny thing about practicing love, it starts to feel like fluency, slow, imperfect, but beautifully real. Healing touch at home. There's a moment in every long journey when you realize you're no longer walking alone. You're moving in sync, even when the road is uneven. For us, healing didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived in the quiet corners of our home, in the way we held each other after long days, in the small touches that said more than any perfect sentence ever could. And honestly, that's the surprising thing about a marriage that almost broke. When it begins to heal, it heals from the inside out. One evening, months after everything had calmed, I walked into the living room and saw him sitting on the floor, fixing a loose leg on our coffee table. Nothing dramatic, just an everyday scene. But something about it hit me hard. This was the man I almost gave up on, the man who almost lost me, the man I once stood across from in the kitchen wondering if love was enough. And now, here he was, grounding our home with the same quiet patience he'd used to help ground my heart. He looked up and smiled. Not the bright American smile I first fell for, but a softer one, the kind you grow into after weathering storms together. I sat beside him, our knees touching lightly, and he said, "You know, we're doing better." Not triumphant, just proud. And in that moment, I realized healing isn't a place you arrive at. It's a way you sit next to someone, knowing you both survived the messy parts. Our communication had changed, too. We didn't talk perfectly. We talked honestly. When one of us felt overwhelmed, we said it early. When misunderstandings happened, and they still did, we paused before the panic spiral. We asked gentle questions instead of making harsh assumptions. It wasn't always smooth, but it was human. And maybe that's the most powerful kind of healing. When your home stops feeling like a battlefield and starts feeling like a safe room where your heart can unclench, we built tiny habits that strengthened us without trying too hard. Touching each other's shoulders when passing in the kitchen. Saying thank you for small things like taking out trash or washing dishes. Leaving notes on the fridge with silly phrases like, "You're cute, but also annoying." Laughing more, blaming less. Letting the house be messy sometimes so we didn't have to be. What surprised me most was how healing the slow language of love became. Speaking slower. Listening slower. Holding each other just a little longer. It's almost scientific. When touch is gentle and words are soft, the body releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone that literally heals emotional wounds. It's biology dressed as romance, and one day, while we were cooking dinner, he wrapped his arms around me from behind. No reason, no moment to fix, nothing to repair. Just connection. His touch wasn't asking anything of me. It wasn't apologizing. It wasn't worried. It was simply home. And for the first time in a long time, I felt healed, not because the world became easier, but because we learned how to carry it together. This whole journey, love, fear, misunderstanding, healing, has taught me something I wish someone had told me earlier. Healing doesn't happen when two people are perfect. It happens when two imperfect hearts slow down enough to understand each other again.